You're listening to The Matt McNeil Show on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820 Heartland Signal in Chicago. It is not Matt McNeil today, as he is off. Instead, you are stuck with producer Brett Johnson filling in for Matt. Always fun to do this every now and then, as we're going to be talking about the latest in political news because, let's be honest, there's no shortage of topics to talk about, including, of course, Kamala Harris, now likely sitting at the top of the Democratic ticket. We'll be talking about what that means, as well as some of her stances on Social Security and Medicare, and how the Biden-Harris campaign and administration, rather, has been protecting Social Security and Medicare. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on, coming up at 3:30, as we'll be joined by Max Richman of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We'll be talking about how Biden and Harris have protected Social Security and Medicare, and what they might be doing in a first term for a potential Kamala Harris presidency. That's coming your way at 3:30. But first, we are going to be talking about right-wing attacks against Kamala Harris. As joining us today is Courtney Hagle. She is a Media Matters Research Director from Media Matters, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to monitoring, analyzing, and correcting conservative misinformation in American media. As Courtney is going to help us delve into the persistent right-wing media conspiracies targeting Vice President Harris, from baseless claims about her eligibility to serve, all the way to birtherism, which, yes, has somehow made a return with Kamala Harris now running for president, despite the fact that she was born in Oakland, California. We'll explore the origins of these narratives, their impact on public perception, and what can be done to counteract this misinformation that we're certainly only going to see increase as the campaign goes on, with now Kamala Harris making her run for the presidency. So, Courtney, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and start talking about how the right-wing media, and whether this is legacy media or even through social media, has been treating Kamala Harris and how they've been trying to attack her. And I want to start off at least with the social media sphere, because there's a video going on TikTok right now that basically uses incoherent audio that wrongly attributed Vice President Harris, that made her basically sound very incoherent, where she basically said, today is today, yesterday was today yesterday, tomorrow will be today tomorrow, so live today, so future today will be as the past today as it is tomorrow. If that sounded incoherent, that's because it was misconstrued audio from Vice President Harris that was edited and put together by some right-wingers over on TikTok. So what I'm curious about with TikTok, Courtney, is that largely this platform doesn't have at least a lot of ways that it counteracts misinformation, which has made this a big breeding ground for trying to put through conspiracy theories against Kamala Harris, correct?
Yeah, TikTok's algorithm is set up to where things can spread and go viral very, very quickly. We wrote about this earlier in the week. My colleague Olivia Little was able to write about it. So after we wrote about it, TikTok actually did remove the audio and took some action to remove the videos in violation of their rules. They seem to kind of rely on a lot of that external reporting to kind of track down the misinformation, because TikTok is so decentralized in where and how a lot of things spread via the algorithm.
So we have that going on with TikTok right now, but let's talk about another aspect of how Harris has been attacked, and that has to do with birtherism, which, yes, I can't believe this is even making a return, being that, as I mentioned at the top of the interview, that Kamala Harris was born in Oakland, California. But can you talk about who's pushing this idea that she is not eligible to serve as president, and what sorts of attacks they're using against her regarding this idea of birtherism?
Yeah, so this is appearing in, a lot of the usual kind of right-wing corners. Trump associate Tom Fitton, he's the president of Judicial Watch, a judicial organization. He's notably not, not a lawyer. So they're kind of questioning, again, where she was born, her eligibility to be president based on her citizenship. And just like Barack Obama, it's not based in anything. There's no factual basis. She was born in Oakland. So they're just kind of ginning up these racist kind of narratives and running the same playbook that they did against Barack Obama.
So at least moving to the legacy media standard, as we look at organizations like whether it's Fox News or Newsmax or One America News. What have they been running against Kamala Harris in terms of their attacks? Because as I understand it, there's been a lot of, kind of grasping at straws, whether it's the likes of Sean Hannity or others. So what line of attack have they been using against her so far?
Yeah, grasping for straws is a good way to put it. As my colleague Matt wrote, they were really left flailing by his decision to back out. So much of the right-wing infrastructure was set up to run a campaign based around Biden specifically. They plan to attack his age, his mental and physical fitness, his competence, as well as so many of those kind of corruption charges they've ginned up over the years, weighing in his China business dealings, Hunter Biden, things like that. So it appeared as though they weren't really prepared with a playbook of compelling arguments against her. A lot of what we're seeing them say is stuff that they talked about back in 2020 when she was a primary candidate, mocking her laugh, calling her weird, claiming she's going to ban plastic straws, red meat, kind of going the Green New Deal playbook, which again, completely baseless. There's nothing suggesting she's going to ban red meat. Probably the most unsurprising route is the racist and misogynistic attacks that, right-wing media immediately pivoted to, dredging up her dating history, attacking her for not having biological children, calling her a DEI candidate, diversity, equity, and inclusion, claiming she's never really earned any of the positions she's had in her career. She's an affirmative action candidate. So that's kind of the immediate attacks that we saw on her.
Now, what I'm interested in talking about, too, is that we've seen comparisons between Kamala Harris's campaign and what happened with Hillary Clinton back in 2016, when she, of course, was a female candidate running for president and endured many misogynistic attacks. But at least in my opinion, I think the right wing hasn't been able to at least hone their attacks versus Kamala as much as they were versus Hillary Clinton. What are your thoughts on that aspect? Do you think that would they have any luck trying to hone in any attacks, or do you think this is kind of different than what we saw with back in Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election cycle?
Yeah, so in my personal opinion, I think there's a few factors why it's maybe not landing quite the same as it did in 2016. One of them is, of course, Hillary Clinton was a unique candidate who had, 20 years being in the public light. She ran for president in 2008. She was first lady in the 90s. Republicans had a 20-year head start on branding her that they really have not against Kamala Harris. Another thing I would point out is, this is a very different environment. In 2016, we had only known Trump the politician for 1 year. We had never really seen him as a president. Some people didn't really understand or know quite what he was capable of, after what he's done with the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade. Those kind of attacks just aren't really front of mind as a concern for a lot of voters. And I would also just say this is a very different environment in terms of, attacks on reproductive rights, things like that. And so some of these really sexist, lowbrow attacks, they just are not landing. In my opinion, I don't think they will land very well with the general public, especially, we've known Trump in the political light for 8 or 9 years now. So when they dredge up her dating history, for example, from 20 years ago as a mark against her, their candidate is Donald Trump. So it's really hard to make some of those attacks stick when they have a candidate with as much baggage who has been front and center for 8 years as he has.
Yeah, especially when I hear rumors that they're potentially going to be trying to Willie Horton her with unfair attack ads about her time as a prosecutor in California, which, as you were kind of alluding to, well, look at the guy she's running against who has 34 felonies. I'm not sure even that line of attack would have quite as much success. But at least I'm curious what your opinion is on this. What is the best way to counteract some of this misinformation that we see from many of these right-wing figures and right-wing outlets? Obviously, organizations like you guys, Media Matters, which you can learn more about over at MediaMatters.org, does a great job at trying to counteract some of this right-wing misinformation. But what's a good way to counteract when you have someone saying, well, look, Kamala Harris is not eligible to serve for president because she wasn't from this country, or you have someone that pick any other right-wing attack, whether she's incoherent or is weak as a prosecutor. What are some of the ways that are effective, at least, to countering some of this misinformation that we're likely to see against her in the future?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the question we're always wanting to answer ourselves. The misinformation is so prevalent right now. It can be very difficult, especially, if you're talking to someone who really believes the birtherism stuff. That's possibly someone who isn't going to be very receptive to facts, particularly when the right has set up this factual infrastructure, or not factual, but their own set of facts on their side. So the best thing, in my opinion, you can do is just keep repeating the truth, keep presenting as much of the factual information you can, but really try and just drown them out. Be louder, have a bigger megaphone, because, again, these people are going to believe the things they want to believe. And if you are at a point right now where you strongly believe Kamala Harris is not eligible or she's not a citizen of the United States, then there's a good chance that you're not someone who's really operating under those facts anyway. And so, again, that's something we struggle with at Media Matters. I've gotten that question before. How do we stop the misinformation? We do the best we can with publishing our content. I encourage people to go to our website and use our resources. We've written about the birtherism. Another one is the right labeling her the border czar for the Biden administration, when that's never been the case. That was a Republican branded attack against her. She was never set up as in charge of immigration for the administration. So I think the best you can kind of do is just present facts and, more importantly, try and drown out the people who are trying to spread misinformation.
Well, we are down to about our last minute, and I want to thank you, Courtney Hagle. She is the research director for Media Matters, joining us on the show, doing some great work with you and your colleagues, watching right-wing media and monitoring that to try to counteract some of these unfair attacks, misinformation. I don't know how you keep your sanity watching things like Fox News and One America News and the other likes, but you guys are definitely doing good work, because I frequently check out your website just to see what the right wing is doing to try to attack, rather than trying to watch some of these outlets myself. So make sure you check it out.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Make sure you check them out. Give them a follow over at MediaMatters.org, and make sure you check out their social media accounts. Again, that is MediaMatters.org. Courtney, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was great being here.
All right, we'll take a break and come on back with more here on the Matt McNeil Show. Brett Johnson filling in here on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll talk a little bit about some VP sweepstakes coming up next here on AM 950.
Do what I like, I lose control.